Everyone, it's Scott and myself. We're here to talk about our second Wellness Wednesday topic, and today we're going to talk about outcomes-based wellness programs. So each week we're bringing you a new consulting discovery, and today we're going to uncover what are some best practices around outcomes-based wellness programs to help you navigate that. So just to set the stage, I want to provide the definition of an outcomes-based wellness program, and that essentially is requiring a participant to meet a health-specific goal in order to achieve the reward or incentive. So this can be based on a person's results relating to their biometric screening, like their glucose, their blood pressure, their cholesterol. It can also be related to a person's results tied to tobacco status. So if they identified as being a tobacco user or not, and then tying an incentive to that result. So to kick us off, I'm going to ask Scott the first question, and that is, when should you consider an outcomes-based incentive for your wellness program?
Well, happy Wellness Wednesday, everybody. That is a great question. The old expression, timing is everything, and I think that definitely applies to outcomes-based incentive for your program. The timing is important because when you think about what we talked about in week one, you remember that the fundamental requirement of an effective program is to have as many people as possible participating in a wellness blood draw, both employees and spouses that are covered under the plan. And so that's where we recommend our clients to begin with, is getting just simple participation with health awareness so they understand their risk factors and their medical conditions. And then once we've gotten that number as high as possible, and as we talked about last week, 90% or better, that is the gold standard. But once you get there, then you can consider whether or not outcomes-based incentive makes sense for your organization. And when you put that in place, what we recommend is that you consider a separate incentive, maybe a smaller incentive, and keep the majority of the incentive to encourage people to simply participate so you don't lose that momentum. And the reason we do that is because, as you and I have seen with a lot of our clients that have put in outcomes-based, and even just with the simple participation, what we notice is that the high risk typically are those individuals that are not going to be early adopters. They're going to participate much later in the process, and it's going to take a lot to get them to the table in terms of engagement. And so what we've seen with some clients is if they put too much emphasis on outcomes-based early, it becomes discouraging to high-risk participants, and they choose not to participate at all, which is the worst-case scenario. So timing is very, very important. And the other thing that I'll add about outcomes-based incentives, Raquel mentioned both an outcomes-based incentive around health factors like glucose and triglycerides and the lipid profile and blood pressure, but there's also outcomes-based on the tobacco. And tobacco, if you're going to do that, we recommend highly that you test for tobacco. We've had clients that had a self-report or the honor system, and what we found out was that when they converted to a test, they had this huge increase in the number of tobacco users. So if you're going to do that, we definitely recommend that you test for it versus just asking for a self-report. Yep. So with that said, let me kind of throw a question to you. Mm-hmm. What are the other key things to keep in mind when you do pursue the outcomes-based incentive for your program?
Yeah, there's a couple things I want to talk about very quickly, but I'll be brief. The first one is outcomes-based programs. You need to make sure that you have a reasonable alternative available. So an example would be if you're testing for tobacco, as we mentioned, that we are strong proponents of, you want to have a reasonable alternative, like a tobacco cessation program that an employee could go through to still qualify for that incentive. There's also regulatory things in terms of compliance considerations that you want to keep in mind for the incentive, as well as how you're communicating the program out. So that's something to keep in mind, is ensuring that you have the compliance knowledge and know-how, and we're going to be posting a compliance blog on that topic coming up soon. And lastly, you want to make sure that you work with a third-party vendor, because anytime you're doing an outcomes-based program, it's really essential that you have a third-party vendor because they have to manage and track the program and report those results back to you in terms of who qualified for the incentive. So in summary, here are the key takeaways for today's outcomes-based topic. The first one is outcomes-based is a viable strategy. However, we consider it secondary to what we talked about last week, the biometrics, the PCP, getting very high engagement in that. We believe outcomes is not essential for you to get an ROI. However, we do strongly recommend it when we're talking about tobacco testing because it is a way to measure objectively across your population. And lastly, you want to make sure you have those compliance considerations in place when you're rolling out an outcomes-based program. So stay tuned for more information on that. We hope you join us next week for our Wellness Wednesday. We'll be talking about carrots versus the stick and talking about incentives. Hope you have a great week. Thanks.